Man's need for it is undeniable. He expresses it in the sky with thrusting jet aircraft, on the ground with screaming race cars, on water with thundering hydroplanes and magnificent sailboats. He uses power from explosive fuels, power from the wind, power from his own muscles, whatever it takes to attain the objective. That ability to go so fast that the wind literally splits before him. In these sports of raw speed, we see man's uncanny ability to become one with a machine. The art of using a tool to perfection. Speed begins with an unrelenting desire to go fast, faster than the competition. It requires an all-consuming commitment to create machines of extraordinary power. And finally, it demands the drive to push those machines to the limit and beyond. For speed never comes easy. Join us now for an inside look at one of the most intensely competitive teams ever in motorsports. A team whose only mission was to be the fastest, no matter what the cost. The black and white era, a time when the sport was linked more to the traditions of the past than the style of the future. Then suddenly, an upstart young team from the Bavarian Motor Works entered the scene. A team whose youthful exuberance, stylish graphics, and technological wizardry would forever change the face of the sport. Recently, some of the very fastest race cars and drivers from this golden era held a reunion hosted by the BMW Car Club of America. Correspondent Bill Adam was there.
It was 20 years ago that BMW formed a special company, BMW Motorsport. Their mission was simple: win on the racetrack and put BMW back on the map as a leader in international automotive technology. Since that time, BMW-powered cars have won thousands of races worldwide, including the Formula One World Championship. What better place to discover their secret of speed than here at BMW Motorsport's 20th anniversary celebration? A gathering of some of the finest drivers in the world, over 50 beautiful cars from the past, and hundreds of dyed-in-the-wool BMW aficionados.
Sam Posey was one of the original members of the motorsport team.
Being in the team was always a psychological advantage at every race we went to. The cars were stunningly well prepared. Very big crews, excellent young German mechanics, and the car was always absolutely ready to go. When it was time for a practice session, the car had already been warmed up.
BMW Motorsport was one of the first real full-time professional efforts to make racing a proper professional sport.
That I was immediately having lunch with people like the chairman of the board. And incidentally, even then, 1975, they had the menu at BMW headquarters in Munich listed the calories and cholesterol count and everything of the different foods that you might choose that day. So they're a very forward-thinking company.
Brian Redman was chosen to lead the North American team in long-distance racing.
We were racing basically against the Porsches. That was the main opposition. And before the race, Jochen Neerpesch, the team manager, got the drivers together. He said, right, he said, Hans, this was Hans Stuck, I wish you to go out and brake the Porsches. And to me, he said, Brian, I wish you to go slowly and win the race. And really, that's what we did.
We were superior on any track which had a long straight by maybe as much as 10 or 15 miles an hour by the end of the straight. The BMW, only like the Ferrari, had that heart at Le Mans. Tremendous speed on that straightaway, all thanks to some characteristic which an engineer could explain to you. I can't, but to a driver it sort of translated to some kind of a heart.
Davy Jones learned about that heart as a 19-year-old aspiring Formula One driver.
I think the first time that I really ever experienced horsepower was when I had the opportunity to drive the Brabham B52 with Nelson Piquet when he just won the championship. It had so much horsepower, but it had an awful lot of turbo lag. So what they had told me was that what Nelson Piquet did was he almost just timed it to where when he turned into a corner, he put his foot down on the throttle, and he knew exactly when the power was going to come in where he could back off the throttle and then go back into it again. Well, you know, here's somebody that's only just 19 years old and is trying to experience 1,000 horsepower like spontaneously. So it was something for me that you know, I figured if this is what Formula One's like, I better go back to school and get a lot more experience.
In the first heat, I just managed to win, but every gauge was off the clock in the wrong direction. The water temperature had gone like this, the oil pressure had gone like that, and we still had another 20-lap heat. And I said to Martin, I came in, I said, Martin, the car won't go any longer. I said, it won't finish the second heat. The engine will break. And he said, Brian, he says, this is the only engine we have. Run it till it breaks. And break it did.
Style. I think a lot of that came from Jochen Neerpasch, too, the team manager. He had several wonderful ideas. It was he who approved the jackets, or as Ronnie Peterson called them, the yackets. And there's an absolutely true story, which was that Ronnie, of course, at the height of his powers in Formula One, for the off weekends, was offered rides in the touring car championship in Europe by both BMW and Ford. Identical money, and apparently identically competitive rides, and Ronnie chose BMW because he preferred the yacket. That really happened. And, you know, Jochen Neerpasch was able to give the whole team a sense of style.
The junior team, Marc Schurer, Manfred Winkelhock, and Eddie Cheever, three up-and-coming Formula One drivers, brought in to race the brand-new BMW 320i. And race they did, often amongst themselves, much to the displeasure of team manager Neerpasch.
Looking back, I think it was the best time I ever had in racing, because there were three young guys, we had equal cars, and we had no team order, nothing. We didn't need to win the championship or anything, they just said you go out and do your best. We were fighting against some old guys, like Stuck was in this racing, was the old touring car specialized driver, you know, like Hans Heyer in Germany. To beat them was really a great experience, but the hardest fight was always between us, the three of us, all the same cars, side by side, and knocking on the doors, and okay, sometimes we lost a bit of body work, but anyway, it was good racing.
By mid-season, the inter-team rivalry became so intense, the juniors were briefly suspended and replaced by the more mature gentleman team of Hans Stuck, Ronnie Peterson, and David Hobbs.
Let us say that it didn't go quite according to plan. We were racing at a place called Diepholz, which is a desperate little airport circuit up there in northern Germany. And the junior team had blotted their copybook in the eyes of the Oberleutnant Herr Neerpasch the week before, when they'd all run into each other. I can't remember they'd been racing, but it might have been Norris Ring. They were racing and they'd all nailed each other and pushed themselves into the wall. And so we are not very good for the image of BMW. We will get to see other drivers in, David and Hans and Ronnie Peterson, and they will show you how it's done. And we had a meeting when we got there. The junior team were all standing there, yes sir, pulling their forelocks. And Ronnie and I and Hans Stuck at one, and I said, now Marc and Eddie Cheever and Manfred Winkelhock. Now boys, this is how it's done. See, now you just watch how it's done. Well, this track was a big pylon track, and they had a huge block of tires all tied together, which made the apex of one of these corners down the runway, and then you rocketed it back, and then there were more of these piles of tires. So I run into this pile of tires on about the second lap of the race, and the whole thing leaks all this water out, and I stagger on, bouncing from pylon to pylon. And then about 10 laps into the race, Ronnie and Stuck are coming into this left-hander at the end of the main straight and absolutely drive each other off the road. Ronnie's car rearing up and almost landing in the crowd, And Hart's in his car going, ho, 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 and drive, put on near patches going, Donner and Blitzen, I don't believe it. You know, he got us guys to show. Made a complete pig's ear of the whole thing. It was just desperate.
You know, if you know Jochen Neerpasch, then you know his face, you know. He never smiles. And it's his face got even darker then. And he was really talking to us. And then you really go, you know, like a little boy, you walk out, you get in the car, and then you go again.
Next, how it all began. The pursuit of speed for the Bavarian Motor Works began not on the ground, but in the air, when a group of engineers installed one of their six-cylinder engines in a biplane. And in 1919, just 16 years after the first flight of the Wright brothers, a daring young aviator soared to a new world altitude record of over 32,000 feet, as high as 747s fly today. Next, the young engineers turned their attention to speed on the ground, introducing a revolutionary new twin-cylinder motorcycle that later went on to set a world speed record of 175 miles per hour on the Frankfurt Autobahn in a streamlined model known as the Egg. The Bavarian Motor Works' first car, the 15-horsepower Dixie, was hardly a milestone in the history of the high-performance automobile, but it did win the reliability stage in the 1928 International Alpine Rally. But speed was what fascinated these young German engineers, and in the 1930s, they created the 328 Roadster with hemispheric combustion chambers, overhead valves, and light alloy bodywork. The 328 was perhaps the fastest production sports car of its day. Yet, just as the 328 achieved its greatest triumph, victory in the Mille Miglia, World War II broke out and production ceased. Although much of the country was left in ruins, it wasn't long before the Germans began to again pursue speed, first on two wheels, then on three, where they captured 19 world championships. But it wouldn't be until the late 1950s that BMW would again seriously compete on four wheels with a two-cylinder, 40-horsepower automobile known as the Weasel with the Heart of a Lion. For this diminutive machine would win a surprising 33 races in 1959 alone and open the door for a return to professional competition. In 1972, the BMW motorsport team was formed. The challenge for competition director Jochen Neerpasch was simple: win on the racetrack, the European Touring Car Championship, and the Formula 2 Championship. With its radical wings and spoilers, the 3.0 CSL Coupe outran the competition for the European Sedan Championship. Formula 2, with a twin overhead camshaft, 16-valve engine, made it to a Marc chassis. The team challenged for the hotly contested series championship. Marc Schurer was one of the team's young lions.
At this time, we even had Formula 1 drivers taking part. I remember Clay Regazzoni did some races in Formula 2, so it was very good for us, and it was very close racing. You were playing with slipstream and, you know, getting a tow and fighting.
In America, Brian Redman discovered a new speed secret driving one of the team's 3.0 CSLs.
And on that particular car, you could pick the inside wheels up on it. And so you could aim at a curb, and you knew the front wheel was going to be above the curb, and this gave you an extra 3 feet of road. You'd aim at the curb, the wheel would come up, and you'd never touch it. You'd never touch the curb.
In the 24 hours of Daytona, Redman teamed with perennial IMSA champion Peter Gregg.
It didn't help very much that Peter Gregg was ill and didn't drive very much at all. You know, I came in the pits at 2 in the morning, ready to change over after an hour and 20 minutes in the car, and he stood there and he said, "Brian, I am sick. Please drive another session." So this is how the race went for us. And we had tremendous dramas. We had a 30-minute lead. We got water in the gas. I was getting in the car. I got in the car, I went out of the pits, and before I was out of the pit lane, the engine stopped. We were pushed back. They cleaned it and worked on it. It took a long time to find it. I went out. It stopped again on the infield, and I had to run back to the pits for tools and the spare jack and the mill sorts of thing. And we got it going again. It stopped again on the banking, and I had to get jumper cables and a battery for the spectators, clear the fuel again, got back into the pits. By the time all this was over, we'd lost the 30 minutes. And in the end, it rained quite hard before the finish, and we had no windshield wiper. And they changed the windshield because the old windshield had got dirty with scarring from the stones, and you couldn't see anything at all. So they said, "We can't fix the wiper, but we'll give you a new windshield." So that was a good race. I was very, very tired at the end of the race. And my best recollection of that is seeing Peter Gregg, the photographs afterwards, immaculate in a white uniform with his arms around both the race queens. And I'm standing about a yard away, and I look like his grandfather.
Redman also won the 12 Hours of Sebring, co-driving with Hans Stuck and Sam Posey.
So around dusk, I did a stint, a tank full of gas, and then Hans did a stint. And then Brian got back in the car. From then to the finish, through the dark, Sebring night, which is always hot and very glaring, Brian, I think, gave one of his great drives, which is really saying something. The car began to suffer a series of mechanical ills. Most notable, certainly from a driver's standpoint, was that the lights began to fail. Very little. You could use the lights for a few seconds per lap, and that was it, and some alternator problems. And so Brian would drive by other people's taillights, hanging in behind them. And then when he got to the pit straight, which is the only illuminated part of the track, he turned the lights on so that we wouldn't be disqualified. Then he plunged back into the dark and turned them back off again. So it was a brave drive and a brilliant one.
You do what you've got to do to win.
Although the team continued to race sedans, these were really test beds for a planned Formula One assault, as David Hobbs discovered.
Well, I'm sure there was a hidden agenda in that 320 program, that's right. We ran it as a 2.1-litre 4. And of course, down the road, Jochen Neerpasch obviously had these big designs on BMW going into Formula One.
But Formula One was not yet in the cards. So Neerpasch set his sights on wresting the World Sports Car Championship from German rival Porsche with an exotic mid-engine machine, the M1. But the car would never attain the speed needed to outrun the Porsches. So we pulled all the stops and created a special venue for the M1, the Pro Car Series. With the world's fastest Grand Prix drivers piloting identical M1s, the series provided extraordinary competition, but also turned out to be extraordinarily expensive. Midway through the program, Neerpasch left the team. Next, the most powerful Formula One motor.
To extract extraordinary horsepower from relatively small displacement motors has been this company's forte since day one. This engine perhaps put out more horsepower than any other in the history of Formula One racing.
It's unbelievable to get that kind of power from such a small engine. I mean, back even 5 years before it actually happened, I don't think anybody would have foreseen what the possibilities were.
Well, of course, Bruce McLaren summed it all up in about 1966, 67. He said, a good big one will always beat a good little one. And part of the answer is to have lots of power. Nowadays, I mean, someone like Bruce would be impressed as all get out with the power that these little engines are capable of developing.
I think the secret is it's a simple engine. It works well. I think the head of the engine, you know, the 4-valve head, is quite good. At the time they built it, it was his time ahead. And since then, I think nothing came up better.
I have to think that the secret of BMW's success in their racing engines is Paul Roscher. He's been with the company for years and years. and he's always been their chief engine development guy, and he obviously just have an absolute magic touch with small displacement, small number of cylinder engines.
In 1982, BMW motorsport engine wizard Paul Roscher joined forces with Nelson Piquet and the Brabham team to put his secrets to the ultimate test, the Formula One World Championship. Piquet had won the '81 title using a 3-liter, normally aspirated V8 Cosworth racing motor that put out 540 horsepower. But Roscher had a secret weapon. He would start with a tiny 1.5-liter, 4-cylinder production block and extract even more power by combining a turbocharger, the latest computerized engine management systems, and exotic fuels. The result was one of the most powerful engines ever built.
Up to about 4th gear, you were not able to put full throttle. And after 4th gear, which is about, I think, 150 miles an hour, from then on you were able to go flat out. And it was like an aircraft, you know, taking off. And also we had, for the qualifying lap, we had a different program. We called it a killer prom. You know, we put a different chip in. And this one really did it. After one lap, the engine was gone. But we always did it when we were very close to get pole position. Then we put this killer prom in, and then the engine went or blew up immediately. And I once asked Paul Roscher, the chief engineer, how much horsepower I had just now out there. And he said, I don't know, because our dyno ends up at 1,200 horsepower, but it was at the end, so it must have been more.
Victory came in the car's 5th race, a 1-2 finish in the 1982 Grand Prix of Canada. The next season, Piquet's Brabham BT-52 captured the World Championship. In America, a 2-liter version of the Formula One motor was used in IMSA GTP competition. Davy Jones and David Hobbs were 2 of the team's drivers.
And it's almost like, wow, until you get used to it. And then once you get used to the horsepower, it's, you know, you always want more. You know, any race driver is always going to tell you need more power. It's got to go faster, and you can never get enough.
They just seem to squeeze the most amazing horsepower out of these engines, and at the same time, they retain their integrity. Somehow they don't scatter themselves all over the countryside. That's the bit that gets me.
Next, the secret. Some may say the ultimate test of speed is Grand Prix Formula One racing. Others will tell you speed doesn't come any harder than on 2 wheels or on 3. But in the end, the secret is the same. Want to. For speed isn't something you ever attain. It's something you must constantly pursue.